Welcome back to First Issues. A wise man once said, failure to plan is planning to fail. Even better is having a plan that has another plan. A plan B, if you may. This is a plan that is devised when making plan A for whatever it is that one wants to carry out. A safety net, if you may, or contingency plan. While a lot of people know that there has to be a plan B for plan A, it is not many who know how to go about this process. Managing partner at Grant Thornton, Kalyana Raman Vijay, joins us this evening.
Contingency is something which is not normal. Obviously, it is something which is out of the normal. But having said that, are we going to be saying we're stuck, or are we going to make contingency plans to be prepared even for the worst? So here it is very important for a corporate to look at the resources which they have, and looking at the resources, in what way can we best make use of the resources, right from employees. Right, we went into lockdown. It's not possible for us to say 100% of the employees will be back in action 100%. It's not possible. So it's very important to see whether how many of them have internet connectivity, how many are able to have direct access into the server. So that segment gives clarity that while some people do not have access, at least the others are able to carry on and support the remaining team. Now when we look at our supply chain, every segment of the supply chain needs to be looked at. We wouldn't know until we actually do a detailed assessment where is the weakest link. Now if a very important segment is not going to be working, for example, a key supplier of ours is just not able to continue the support, it's very important to have backup plans. The same way from a funding point of view, if the money from the normal revenue channels do not come, how am I going to keep things open? And if that also fails, what is the next step? And finally, things which at times gets ignored is, how is my insurance cover to support me in these kind of difficult times? So all these aspects need to be looked at on a practical basis without too much of emotions. We've got to be real about it, face the reality, and have a contingency plan. That itself will give confidence for us to run the main plan much more confidently.
Take us through the process of actually coming up with a contingency plan in what is known as scenario planning.
As the name contingency plan says, it is very important to reflect on, in the event of a contingency, how am I going to proactively face the challenge? So every segment of the organization needs to be looked at. So for a typical corporate, right, how is my IT infrastructure? To start with, if we are not able to come back to office like how we used to do in the past, say 20-30% will be coming to office, the remaining team will be working out of the office from their home and things like that. How is my, in the event of a complete lockdown, what's going to be the utilization of the resources? How am I going to give access to people? That's a segment to look at. The same way, from revenue generating aspects, there could be certain things which are low hanging fruits, some which will have a much more timeline in terms of conversion. So it's worth the while to look at where are we going to focus on, so that the focus is not on a complete range of activities, it's more focused on aspects where we can get the transition in terms of revenue much more faster. The same way, in terms of what are the limits which I have from working capital, have I made the best usage of it? In the event my overdraft gets hit, how am I going to be addressing that, and what kind of security structures do we need to put in place? Then comes the support given by government. Government of Botswana has given quite a lot of support, whether it is in the form of, you take from paying taxes, you're allowed to defer your self-assessment tax, and a lot of initiatives has been done, including providing wage subsidy for employees, and now most recently they've launched the loan guarantee scheme. So all these aspects should be looked at as a holistic aspect, and again to say, in the event of something which we've not really foreseen happens, how are we going to bounce back and come out? So we call it, in firms like us, it is compulsory to have a disaster recovery plan. Now, in the event of a disaster, if your file server collapses due to a power surge, how are you going to come out of it? We can't say for 2 weeks we can't do anything about it. So these are the aspects which needs to be thought about and invested well in advance, so that in the event, contingency doesn't give us advance notice. It happens when it happens without notice. So this is where contingency planning really helps in us being proactive and, to the best of our abilities, sustain the shocks which come into the system. For most of the businesses, the lockdown was a shock. Now another new problem which has come through in the last couple of months, more so than before, is the importance of cybersecurity. One does not even think about the kind of attacks you're vulnerable to, and if it gets into our system, the whole thing gets really compromised. So all these aspects needs to be looked at on a realistic basis to say, in the event of a contingency, how am I as a firm going to be working on it? What is the backup plan? And that's the importance of having a contingency plan. We cannot keep only one scenario and carry on. We will not be, or we will be more vulnerable to every challenge happening around us. A contingency plan, as you just now said, it is a plan for what happens something out of the blue. Now, to have a plan which is foolproof is all dependent on the amount of capacity, the amount of budget a firm can afford to invest. Now, there are firms with hyper security requirements where they just cannot even afford 1 minute of downtime. So typically what such corporates do is they do have a replicated structure of their main server offsite. So if there is a challenge, I'm just giving an example from an IT infrastructure point of view. So if there is a virus attacked or lightning attacked or anything which brings the server down to a standstill, instantly it will transition onto the offsite and life carries on as if nothing has happened. Now, but that's a very expensive proposition. Not all the firms can prepare. So it is very important for the respective business to look at what is the realistic investment they can make on their contingency planning, and must be ready to accept the risk of the contingency coming. In the event a risk comes and a company does not have, they have only a backup tape, for example, they do not have a complete replicated server, it will take more time than immediate. But if they say that is perfectly fine, it is not going to be a disaster for us, we'll be able to manage it, it's the decision of the owners. In Crux, it is more of sort of mitigating your risks. It doesn't eradicate the risks for sure. So it is a direct aspect, direct link to the investment you make. The amount of mitigation is also linked to that whole thing as such.
When running a business means
Where did I put that receipt?
we can help you with instant accounting, free software that does your bookkeeping for you. When running a business means
Wait, what do you mean the container hasn't arrived?
we help protect your business from risk with Mohwebi Insurance. And when it means
How do we pay our staff that don't have bank accounts?
we help you make multiple payments directly to people's phones with e-wallet bulk send. At FNB, we're constantly innovating to help business owners at every stage of their journey.
Welcome back to First Issues. We continue our conversation on contingency planning with Grant Thornton Managing Partner Kalyana Raman Vijay. How often should a contingency plan be reviewed?
In terms of reviewing a contingency plan, it is again directly connected to the tolerance of the respective firm. It is something which I would say, to the best of the abilities of the management, it should be kept relevant at any given point of time. What you might have done 4 years back might not be relevant in today's world. So that's quite important to look at it, and that's where it's always in a pandemic like what hit us, or what we are right through in the middle of that, is it is extremely important to have a team which keeps reviewing what are the risks which we are exposed to, and proactively keep, because people, the various teams will be carrying on with addressing their core responsibilities. So there has to be some focus given to looking ahead, looking into what could go wrong and things like that. So my view would be that it should be kept as live as possible and as practical as possible, and it should be owned by the document. It should not be just a document for it to be present. It should be a document which really guides and helps the management.
How much resources does a company need to invest into a contingency plan?
In terms of resource for a contingency plan, it is an aspect which is directly connected to the size of the company also. For a huge corporate, obviously they have an enterprise risk management in place, where they continually keep having track of what are the risks the firm is exposed to and what are the mitigants in place to address those risks. So that's an ongoing process where the audit committee oversees the effectiveness of such ERM process. Now for a smaller company, it is very difficult to keep having all these things in place, but then it's quite important for the owners, the management, to have a realistic assessment of what are the risks they are exposed to. What happens, what happens if my core members of my team leave? What's going to be the backup plan? What happens if we don't have adequate cash resources for our plans going forward? What happens if our supplies are not reliable? All these aspects need to be on a regular basis assessed. Very often we see that people live in the current and do not plan for these ones, and those are the businesses who do not sustain the kind of impact what we are going through at this point of time. So being practical is something which is a need of today. We can't be saying, if I see there is funds in my bank, that is mine. That's not the case. What is your creditors? What is your debtors? What is the working capital commitment you have? That's the reality than what you see in a bank account. So contingency plan is something which scales depending on the operations, but whichever be the size of operations, they should have something which is relevant to their size. But the concept which needs to be understood is there needs to be a plan in place for any contingency. Contingency is a contingency. We have not foreseen it.
This program was brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, How can we help you?